You can't end war. You can't stop fashion industry from polluting our oceans, but you can do something in your neighborhood. You can do something at your school board. You can do something for the people right around. And if we all had that perspective, I think a lot
Yeah.
of progress could be
Oh,
made.
I think that's perfect. And I will add the one thing that I've noticed over the years is that we have a lot more power than we think we
Yeah.
do. And one place to look for that is look what happens when we bond together in a boycott of something.
Yeah. Yeah.
When enough people say, nope, we don't want that,
Yep.
it does make a difference. Some days the headlines say that we're the problem, but here we remember that we can be the cure. I'm Amy, and this is Green Living Now. Today, ecological designer Kendra Hoffman shares her idea of earth care, a way to move from overwhelm and guilt into connection, clarity, and impact. We talk about reclaiming childhood wonders, how a single sit spot can shift your perspective, and why true change actually starts small, local, and reciprocal. If you've been craving hope with a compass, this one's for you. That's what we're diving into today on the Green Living Now podcast, your guide to a toxin-free home, vibrant energy, and a life that feels as good as it looks. To begin your own journey, download my complimentary Conscious Woman's Guide, 5 Steps to a Toxin-Free Home and Lifestyle. It's at greenlivingnow.com. Okay, let's dive in. Well, Kendra, welcome to the Green Living Now podcast.
Thanks, Amy. I'm so happy to be here.
Me too. We've been wanting to have this conversation for quite some time.
Uh-huh.
So we finally made it happen.
Yeah.
So since others don't know you and your work, can you just give us a little idea of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I'll try to be brief. I'm Kendra Hoffman. I live in Dillsburg, Pennsylvania, on the north side of South Mountain, within the Susquehanna River watershed and the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So that's where I'm from, where I am. That's where I do my work. For the last decade or so, I've been a growing ecological designer and regenerative landscape company owner with a wide range of different applications for what we can do, from pollinator gardens and wildflower meadows to rain gardens and more. But recently, I've been kind of pivoting my business model and also my attention into education and mentorship. So I recently launched a collective of earth care professionals, and I'm actually mentoring them into place of business and, I guess, life skills that they can do the same kind of work that I've been doing. So that's really fun. Yeah. And an evolution in my own career of expanding impact, which is one of my big goals. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell professionally. And there's a lot more to it, of course, but I'm sure we'll talk about it.
If you could define what you mean by earth care, because I think that it's a very intentional term that you use, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's like a big story around this, but I'll just clearly describe what I have come up with as a working definition. And then, we can talk about that if curiosity ensues. I call earth care mindful ecological action emerging from a reciprocal relationship with nature in your place. So it's place-based. It is reciprocal, not just a good connection or a good feeling about nature. I capitalize nature to give it autonomy. Many of us capitalize the word earth for the same reason, and personhood in a way. And mindful ecological action is important because ecological is relational by nature. The study of ecology is the study of living things within their environment, right? And mindful being that we are putting attention and focus into the work instead of just like haphazardly picking something that's going to assuage our guilt for the ecological crisis or whatever it is. It's really mindful ecological action. So it is land stewardship, it is regenerative farming, it is many different things in that category. And then the way I've kind of brought it all back together is within a 4-point framework that I use. I call it the Earth Care Compass. And that just helps people move on a journey from awareness, where you learn about what this is at Earth Care as a practice, or the ecological crisis, whatever you're learning about, moving into connection first, then before moving into action, and then being able to realize impact. So a lot of times I think we try to rush into action thinking we've got to do something to save the planet. and
Mm.
misstep, and it's not like I run around shaming people for making, bad choices or whatever it is. We're all very, very, I think, good intentioned, but really the point of earth care to me is to forge a deep reciprocal relationship with nature. And then out of that, the action emerges. So
Interesting. Okay, so can you give an example of what that looks like?
yeah, in my work, it's pretty clear. I've developed a framework for the business that I operate. And so an earth care business would be one that actually I would say works a little bit more specifically for planting pollinators, not just anything, right? Native
Okay.
plants are in a reciprocal relationship automatically with their native environment, and they benefit the native pollinators, and the whole ecosystem is in this reciprocal reaction. So if we, as the steward, can learn first, like become aware, study the environment, learn to identify plants and understand what belongs there, and then develop a relationship through what I consider core routines, like the sit spot, like nature journaling, like land walking, walking to listen, not with podcasts in your ear, you know,
Uh-huh.
but really intending to be in the presence of nature, listening to the wind, listening to the song of the birds, and starting to get to know them, starting to interact with the living beings in your area, and starting to feed them and nourish them and be in relationship with them. That is what then starts to build the ability to take really key actions. And you actually find that you have to do a lot less. And your action can be a lot more impactful and powerful because you've slowed down, regulated your nervous system with all this good nature activity, right? And found out what can make the most effective turning point on your place. So that's
Mm,
kind of speaking to it generally, but
neat. It reminds me of some retreats that I've given here on the organic farm where I live. And I've done this exercise. Well, I've done a few of these different exercises, the nature journaling for one, walking silently, on a particular path and writing down everything that you notice.
yeah.
And then one that's really powerful is when people just sit there with their eyes closed and they're counting how many different sounds they're hearing. So birds, cars, crickets, so you just do that. And then you open your eyes to see how many fingers people are holding up to see if you've gotten the
I
same
love that.
number, which is
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
So the sit spot, is that like sitting against a tree or what's that one?
Yeah, so sit spot is choosing a place in nature ideally, but if you live in an urban environment, even your doorstep is outside under the sun,
Mm,
the clouds rolling by or whatnot, and that's still part of nature. So just choosing a spot that you can revisit regularly and spend minimum 5 minutes, but ideally about 20 minutes or a little bit
okay.
more, because the goal of sit spot, I mean, it's very free of goals, but the one goal that I would say is to be able to witness baseline. Baseline is this state of nature that would exist if you weren't there or if you weren't perceived as a threat. So
Mm,
going back to the same place over and over again, and when you walk into the woods or even when you walk into a community garden or a park in the city, you're creating a disturbance that is abnormal to their daily routine, especially if you're not part of their daily routine yet. So initially, people have a hard time noticing patterns, and that's why we developed a little mini challenge just to kind of guide people into this practice. But noticing patterns of nature is like one of those ways to learn nature's language and develop a relationship. So the sit spot's really probably the most powerful practice of all, because if you return to the same place around the same time, you become a part of the natural routine of the place. And the birds and the animals, the fox that moves through at dusk, all become aware of your consistent presence, and you become
uh,
less and less of a threat. And then you can witness what they would do if they weren't sounding the alarm to their family members, like, "There's a hunter
ah,
here," or "There's a predator here," because we are a
yeah.
predator to most other species left on the planet. I remember a few times where I had a consistent sit spot in my life, and I was able to show up on a regular basis, and, I mean, it's a thing. It's hard to find in
Yeah.
our lives. But I remember a few specific, incredibly life-changing moments where I sat there long enough, maybe I got bored for a while, whatever it was. The only way to describe it is to say you have to experience it, to understand it.
Yeah.
But the the atmosphere changes. You can feel it. You can feel this like sort of pressure lift, and the animals and birds around you are just suddenly free. They're safe.
Mm,
And the only thing else I can compare it to do is when maybe if you're done nervous system work, and you have practiced something for a while and you feel that shift in your body to safety, you can feel that internally with nervous system work, and you can feel that externally with this kind of presencing in
Mm.
nature.
Oh, I
And
like that.
really
That's
powerful.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, how did you get into all of this?
That's a great question. I'd say I was kind of, in a way, born into it because I am privileged to have had a family that, even though we were extremely poor, my parents decided to prioritize homeschooling us, and they bought this really dilapidated old farm that was like basically overgrown woods that we got to play in after we were done with our studies. And I spent a
Mm.
lot of time outside. And I remember having these kinds of experiences as a child that I didn't have this kind of, academic language or applied philosophy for. But I remember having these experiences. So when I started finding this work as an adult through landscaping jobs, I've managed CSA farms, I've done lots of outdoor work. And then getting into permaculture as a community and a movement and a body of study, which I think is pretty academic. And then starting my own business and all the choices that, in some ways, some of these decisions and turning points kind of just landed on my lap in a way.
Mm.
Other ways I see how I was being internally guided by a return to my senses. That's what I call it, because of what had been established in me as a child with this deep connection with nature. I just remember if I was having a hard time or a bad day, I would run to the woods, and that was my safe place. And,
Mm.
I don't think everyone has that formative experience. Uh,
No, especially people like me who grew up in New York City and felt like a plant out of place.
right, right, right. That's often the case. Yeah, I feel like we can all find that in
Yeah.
ourselves because that is who we are as a part of nature ourselves. We all have that deep connection knowing that this planet is our home and
Mm.
being is our mother, and we're returning to this place in the end, that even outside of spiritual beliefs around all the things that we don't really know the answer to. The
And
one thing we do know is that, like, our blood and bones and body are part of this natural world, and that we depend on the ecosystem for our very sustenance, the air and the water, etc. So, and just on a scientific level, I think our bodies know the truth is that we are safe with nature, and that we can find a way to connect that can help in return for what all of the benefits are that we receive. Just
mm,
part of
I
that.
like that.
What's
So
that?
I think there's a lot of people that don't necessarily see themselves as part of nature. I feel like there's this perception of nature's over there and
Yes.
we humans are over here, especially if we are living in a city or a suburb and there's not a lot of nature available to connect with. But even if there is, I mean, I even catch myself. I live in this beautiful place in Vermont, as I mentioned, on an organic farm, and I take a walk every morning with my dogs, and I still, even with all my experience and training, I still have to remind myself to stop doing the to-do list in my head and to notice, oh, wow, those pine needles smell really good. Or I can smell that smell of the leaves starting to decay because, it's fall and they've fallen off and I'm stepping on them. And then I see so many different birds. I was just out before we got on here. I was looking at this apple tree that we have that we never pick from, and I decided I was going to taste that apple. And as I was standing there, this little tiny finch came over really close, and I was like, "Ooh, hello." So, I mean, for me, I've chosen this consciously because I knew that city life and suburban life was not for me. But what would you say to somebody who wants to feel more connected to nature, but doesn't necessarily feel like it's part of us or that we're part of it?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. And I feel like this comes up a lot. And there's a little bit of, I think that help me get back around to answering that question.
Sure.
But just as context, there's been a lot of messaging, I think, and who knows what the source of this is or what the reason,
Mm.
but I witnessed the effects of something, so I call it out. And I think there's been a
Yes.
lot of messaging around the idea that humans are a cancer on the earth and we are a plague
Mm.
on this planet and we're killing it faster than we could ever restore it. And all of that, I think, is, aside from the potential for there to be, profits made on people that can't see themselves as part of this place, so we hate ourselves. Any kind of self-hatred message, I think, originates somewhere in someone benefiting to profit from how we want to fix that. But
Yeah.
even without that perspective or lens, I think that there is a natural inclination to understand how much harm we have done and to blame
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
to some degree, true, but I
Yes.
see it not as part of our nature, which does get into a religious debate in some circles, right? But I see it as actually a dysfunction. So, as a regenerative farmer yourself, a good comparison is it's not the cow, it's the how, right?
Mm.
Right? There's nothing
Yeah.
essentially wrong with a cow existing. It's not killing the
Right.
planet because it's farting, it's how it's
Right.
being farmed that is
Yes.
destroying the earth, right? And if you
Agreed.
regeneratively, it's great for the earth.
Yeah.
So I feel the same way about humans. It's not humanity that is evil and wrong and destroying the planet. It's how we've been living. And this
Yeah.
kind of goes back to your whole mission as well with the green living, right? That
Yeah.
the way in which we're living is not only killing the planet, it's killing ourselves
Oh, no question.
for
So
to
I think when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking it's an unconscious way of living that I think gets us into trouble.
Yes.
And I was just having these interesting comments on a YouTube video where people were basically saying organic is a scam.
Mhm.
It's no better than conventional. Actually, it's more dangerous. I mean, I'm
Oh,
overwhelmed by the messages. And I even plugged it into Chat GPT. I was like, okay,
yes.
what's behind these kinds of comments? Like, how would you describe somebody
Yeah.
that speaks this kind of stuff? And I thought it was fascinating, the information that came back. And essentially, it was that number one is if people acknowledge that what they've been doing has caused them harm as well as the planet, that's a heavy load to bear. And so
Mhm.
they kind of push it away and they want to just dismiss it all. Then there's all this messaging from, big industry. So pesticide companies or big ag or,
Yeah.
big food. We get all of these different mixed messages, incorrect messages. And I think some people just don't know the difference between what's true and what's not.
Right.
And I think, there's a few different levels of other things that it mentioned, but what's your thought about that?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think about this a lot because I see the messaging and I see the way that it torments people. Well, and I really think that it does have a lot to do with that internal guilt complex, right? We know
Yeah.
something's wrong. We don't know who or what to blame. Blaming the system feels to some of us really far out. Like, okay, how far can you get blaming something that you can't do anything about? So we turn it
Yeah,
back.
that's a very significant piece. That not being able to do something about it
Yeah.
is what I
Right.
think leaves many of us feeling powerless.
Yes, absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
the powerless state, I think, is where certain messaging that's, designed for profit takes advantage, right? And
Yes.
says, oh,
Yes.
here's a new product or another greenwashed way to solve the thing you feel really bad about. Now, don't you feel
Yeah.
bad, 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 bad? It's like poking this wound, in us.
Yeah.
To me, the real wound in us is actually unconsciously realizing, and now more and more of us are consciously waking up to this, realizing unconsciously aware, our bodies are aware that we
Mm.
are destroying our home, our very
Yes.
the life source of our sustaining ability on this planet. But it's happened so far, so long in
Hmm.
such small ways that we are now stuck. Like nobody's going to stop, not nobody, a few people have gone off grid, but very few of us can
Right.
afford to stop powering our homes with
Exactly.
from the grid. And so we're stuck in this trap of realizing that we're a hypocrite, that we care
Right.
about the planet, we want to make it stop. So we'd rather
Right.
blame something else or feel really shitty about ourselves.
Yeah.
We get stuck in these blame shame cycles that are just not good.
I agree with you. And I see the corporate influence. So one of the things I'm sure you've noticed is how many corporations are buying up small family farms.
Yes.
And then, we're hearing about this ecological crisis of agriculture in general as though there's only one kind, right? That
Right.
there's only, you
Right.
know, factory farming and big ag. But we
Right.
also know that we have, and you mentioned it about it's not anything inherently wrong with a cow, it's how that cow is managed. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I've seen incredible farms here that are raising beef, for example, and are doing this beautiful job of maintaining pastures and rotating animals every day onto a different patch. And like their pastures are absolutely lush and beautiful. But the thing that really freaks me out is First of all, losing family farms, but secondly, having this narrative about factory farm or factory created food, whether it's, the meat alternatives that are being developed in laboratories or all these different lab created foods that are being touted as though they're ecologically sound and much less. It's terrifying because
I'll
it's
just say
so
it.
far from what I think is
It's a
what
form
we
of
need.
insanity. It's a
Yeah.
form of insanity. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Just I don't even care who argues with that. That's
Right.
my opinion. Yeah, I mean, to just look at the ingredient list, even that is totally criticizable, but because,
Yes.
anything with more than a handful of ingredients, like where's all that coming from and what is it doing to
Exactly.
the body? But how do we even get these ingredients into that patty form or that it's a massive amount of fossil fueled industry for processing
Exactly.
units and transportation and the plastic package that it's in. It's actually a form of insanity to open that up and go through the process of consuming it without thinking that this is better for the planet.
Right.
Something that was shipped to me from across the country than the farmer down the road.
Right.
Which,
Right.
you
Right.
know,
I mean, I would, and I'll always do, I would much rather buy from, a grass-fed, grass-finished farm for beef here in Vermont than get one of those, impossible
I think
patties.
it's a
I'm
good
not going to say
name.
that.
It's impossible. I think it's funny that they named it that.
I know. I thought it was so perfect. I was like, wow, they must have known that it
It's
was
actually
impossible.
impossible.
Yeah. And the thing that scares me about that is that too many people are buying that narrative, thinking that they're doing something better by purchasing this chemical
Yeah,
glob that's, that actually still uses, as far as I understand, at least some of the products are still using meat cells, right?
yeah,
So they're just using the cells from aborted baby cows as opposed to the actual adult cow. Yeah.
right. Wild.
Nuts.
Yeah, really. Yeah, sometimes I don't even know what to do about that whole aspect because it's just so inconceivably illogical to me, and
Right.
that's where it kinda comes back to this idea that, like, it's very clear that there are powerful motivations of messaging, right? Of
Yes.
manipulation, and it goes back pretty far before Impossible Burger or, lab-grown meat was even possible. There was a huge, campaign to smear animals, meat,
Oh
and,
gosh, yes.
like
Yeah.
so, I mean, this is a natural consequence of 2 or 3 generations of saying, like, vegan is the only way to save the planet, the only way you should eat, and that's just I mean, it's literally biophysically impossible, for everyone on
Well,
the planet to do it that way.
yeah, I have no problem if somebody wants to be a vegan. And I
Yeah,
get the philosophical reasons, but I think that what's often missed is that in order to grow healthy vegetables, you often need animal inputs, whether it's manure or blood meal or, there's this sort of disconnection of, well, I'm not eating an animal, I'm just eating plants. Well, yes, but
and
how does that get created?
killing too. I mean, to monocrop fields or even
Oh
not
gosh,
to
yeah.
monocrop, you have to kill so many unpleasant animals. They're
That's
just
right, the unintended death or
or
no, actually, it's intended death of
yeah, yeah,
all of those species that were living on that land that then became acres and acres of, genetically modified soy or corn or what have you. I mean, we have this battle even here in the green state of Vermont. Across from us, there's this beautiful pasture that is now being leased out to the conventional dairy farm, who this year grew GMO corn and sprayed it twice with glyphosate. And they know we're a certified organic farm. And so my husband Dave had to time his corn planting to make sure that the pollens would never connect.
right. That's
And
so
it just, yeah, it's just so frustrating to see the ignorance, really. I mean, this particular farm believes they're doing something good because they're doing no till, but they're doing no till with glyphosate, which then
right,
combines with the phosphate in the soil. We have a lot of phosphate because what I'm told is that back in the 70s or 80s, the government was practically giving away superphosphate bags to farmers. So we
wow.
have higher than normal phosphate. And so my understanding is that phosphate and glyphosate actually bind together. And then when it rains, that travels into the rivers and into the lake. And then we get this overgrowth of green, you know, toxic algae.
Yeah. and that
So
causes die-off in the waterways, and that is,
exactly.
I mean, just a cascade. It's a domino
Yes.
effect of death. It's really frustrating to just witness how, I mean, we just described a system that's happening that's pretty easy to understand, right? That's
Yeah.
not rocket science. You don't need to have an advanced education to understand that there's
Right.
downstream effect of these things. But the
Right.
propaganda machine is so effective
Yeah.
at saying, no, the scientists say glyphosate is good. Glyphosate works. It's the best that we've got, and you've got to use it. And I mean, this is one of the reasons I had to develop the whole code of ethics for earth care as a
Uh,
concept and as a practice, because conservationists. So in the work that I do, it's less about farming and it's more about like supporting nature with pollinator. So in a farming context, an earth
okay.
practice would be like alley cropping with pollinators, right? Native pollinator plants, supporting plants. So in this context, we are often told to do site prep on major, massive amounts of acreage with glyphosate to kill off all the invasive species and then plant the natives.
Oh
And
my gosh.
and oh, yeah. And so that's why I had to create a code of ethics. Like, I couldn't find a movement that wasn't doing something that I felt totally overwhelmed by a nuanced aspect of what they were like. The whole conservation movement is based on using glyphosate by the tons. I mean, by
Yeah.
tons.
That's actually come up in our community because of Japanese knotweed, which
Mhm.
is an invasive, although it is also like the last food that bees eat before the winter, right? But I
And
know that it can wreak havoc. I mean, it's everywhere now. It's like it lines our entire rivers with a wall of these,
yeah,
things,
same.
which actually can be turned into a tincture to help with Lyme disease.
Yes. But, and
I
real
so
quick,
yes.
doing an ecological function too that we've created the gap for. This is a huge
Ooh.
part of what my work is. It's filling a gap in the ecosystem by preventing erosion alongside riverbanks.
So that's such an interesting point because I've heard the opposite claim. They're saying, oh, well, it's shallow roots and it's continuing to add to the erosion. And then we can't get the better plants in there that have a better root system. And so we're going to spray it with glyphosate to get rid of it. So the community actually came together and said, no, we don't want this. And so
Good.
they ended up using goats, which is
Yeah,
great.
perfect. Yeah,
So it's possible to do these things without these toxic chemicals. And yet, to your point, conservation practices would say, well, it's better to eradicate this Japanese knotweed with chemicals, and then we'll do the right thing.
right, right. I think that comes from a war mentality. And I think that comes
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
both angles, both humanity kind of gone mad over, centuries of just using war to solve
Right.
problems.
War on
And
drugs.
exactly, war on terror or whatever is the next
Yeah.
thing. And from the other side of things where we are terrified of nature. And
Yes.
I had a really sweet experience a couple years ago when I was out camping under the stars with some friends, and we all looked up under our little campsite, and I noticed a dead branch in a tree, right? And I was like, "Oh no, we have to move." And then
Uh-huh.
I was thinking about that as I was falling asleep, and I actually got emotional that night because I was thinking, "Wow, that one simple little thing is why we've built concrete walls around us to keep our loved ones safe." Like,
Right.
we are terrified for our loved ones to be eaten by a bear or stolen by a neighboring tribe or whatever it is. But mostly, this experience of the whatever 10,000 years before this era, where it was a life-threatening experience to live
Right.
wild. And
Right.
there were megafauna and there were packs of wolves, like, 10 times the size of any wolf we have now. And
Right.
there's just a lack of awareness of the fact that we are actually safer now than we've ever been, and
Yes.
that's because we went to war with nature, and we're still at war with nature, and
Exactly.
and we've killed off a lot of people who aligned with nature, right?
Yeah.
Indigenous people all over
Yeah.
the planet, we genocided the people that lived here,
Right.
and
That taught us so much about how to live here.
totally it's insane, another insanity.
And we're
We've
talking about Native Americans for anybody that might not be able
right,
to read between the
right,
lines here.
right, right. And we even kill our own people, through the
Yes.
whole witch trials when
Oh
they
my
align
gosh.
too much with the power of nature to heal.
Practicing herbalist women and
All over
yes.
the planet, anyone who aligns too closely with the power of nature gets isolated,
Yes.
shut off, and killed.
I want to put an exclamation point on that. Say that again.
Yeah, so I believe the pattern that I see in history is that anyone who closely aligns with the power of nature is systematically isolated or genocide, basically killed off in order
Right.
to basically to keep the narrative going that like we're better at this than nature is. And it's a very much capital S science. It's a very much like we know what we're doing in our ivory towers of wisdom and knowledge from all of our proven, tested research. It's this mentality that it's just an incredible ego. It's an incredibly
Yes.
big head that can say, and to turn that into a war against nature and the people who align with nature is what I
Mm.
see the bigger elephant in the room all this time.
Yeah, I see the tension between the better living through chemicals population and those of us who I would say have come from maybe past lives also, but have this awareness from probably a young age. It certainly sounds like it was for you. And even for me, I was
Mhm.
able to escape to places like Martha's Vineyard on Chappaquiddick Island, and I got to have some incredible time, going to different friends. I went to a school where I had a lot of rich friends, so they had country houses, so I got to get
Uh-huh.
away. And so I got to like jump on a trampoline at night under the stars or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's this dichotomy of a population that buys into this belief that we're better off because of all the chemicals that have been created, and those of us who say, no, actually, not that there isn't a place for some of
Uh,
that at times.
yeah.
There is this other way of living that is so much more connected to who we really are
Yeah.
and this interconnection that we have with this amazing planet that we've been gifted to live on.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of times when I'm talking to some of these people that believe completely the opposite from the way that I do, I feel like we're on different planets here. Like we're never going to bridge this gap here, no matter how many studies I come up with to show
Yeah.
these people or what have you. So how do you deal with that? Like
Yeah.
what are your ways of coping with that,
Yeah.
distinct
That's
difference between how we live?
right. Well, I think that is actually coming full circle to the mission I have with sharing earth care with people because
Okay.
centering a true connection with nature has been my mission for at least the last 5 or 6 years since I had some of my own really incredible ecological awakening experiences.
Mm.
And I want to actually touch point back on what you just said, raised in the city, not a lot of nature around, but you had these little touchstones, you had these moments, and
Yes.
wasn't that almost enough? Like, look at you now, look where you are now.
Right.
All your human brain and body actually needed was a few moments of connection that you still remember probably more vivid than anything else you did in your childhood, right?
Yep.
I have talked to literally hundreds of people, tons of my own clients, friends, etc. And
Yeah.
everyone has these little core memories in their childhood that,
Yeah.
everyone has the trauma memories, right? And then they have some sweet relational memories, but they don't have memories of like sitting at their desk doing their homework assignment. They have memories of being in nature, whether it was songs, random and rare, or even just one time. Nobody forgets those moments because your whole entire
Mm,
being is set alive by that
that's
present,
right.
right? So, what I kind of realized, and through some of my own experiences, then as I got into this work, was that that's all I really needed to do. Is I didn't need to convince anyone with statistics and research and studies,
Mm,
because that's not possible. We've all learned that the hard
correct.
all I needed to do was introduce them to that and hopefully encourage them to have their own magical experience in their own body with nature. And I've witnessed that transform even adults' lives.
I
So,
love that.
yeah, it's actually that simple. I am
So, yeah, Kendra, can you give an example of somebody that you witnessed, like what happened to them?
Yeah, well, I'll start with my own little moment of ecological awakening, and
Sure.
I had been living away from Pennsylvania for a long time. I lived in California and other places, and I was back and driving around with a new sort of friend slash mentor, and he ended up being one of my permaculture design teachers. And
Hmm.
I was driving around with him and we were driving past, a beautiful cornfield near the end of summer when it's just golden, right? It's like that quintessential American look. And I was just admiring it like, oh, I just miss this place so much. Look at that beautiful field. And he so curtly said, "Oh, that's an ecological nightmare." It was
Oh
like,
no.
that is a monocrop sprayed with
Oh,
glyphosate and destroying the soil, and I went on this list, and
ye-
I was it was one of those life-changing moments where my perspective shifted, right? That's an awakening. Like, I was
yeah,
like, "Oh," ever since then, all I've seen in those kinds of monocropped fields is the devastation, not the
yeah,
cultivation of a crop that we need, because we don't actually need that.
right.
And that moment right there, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I never thought of something that way." So,
Mm,
as I've worked with others, I've tried to subtly encourage or inspire moments like that just when the opportunity comes up, right?
yeah,
Had a couple clients that came to me because they wanted, pollinator gardens or raised beds or whatever it is on my service list. And after
right.
a couple months of working together, or even some of them at the initial consultation, all it took was walking around, listening to them, gaining their trust, and then asking a simple question like, "Oh, I noticed you have a birdhouse. Do you like birds?" "Oh, yeah, I
Mm,
love birds." And you find that connection point. Everyone has one. There's not a human
hmm
on this planet that doesn't have a favorite little thing about that's related to nature. So then you
right.
lean into that and you are like, "Oh, okay, well, there's a bunch of native shrubs that have berries all season that would feed the native
Oh,
birds and bring them closer to you." And then all of a sudden, their whole demeanor changes. They're not overwhelmed and upset and annoyed by how weedy their place is. They're like, "Oh, really? I can attract one of my favorite things." And you see this
oh,
childlike excitement come out of them, and that's
aw,
all that's needed. And then we have a lifetime relationship working
that's
together.
beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah, it
I
is.
love that. Yeah, I think that's the way we have to move forward because there's so many things that are overwhelming us and beyond obviously the earth issues, but I feel like if we can concentrate on those kinds of moments and share those with other people and inspire whatever it is for them,
Yeah.
that's going to really strengthen this feeling like, oh yeah, we are part of this earth and it is part of us and all these creatures that we share this planet with. I'm amazed the contrast of living in Manhattan versus living on a farm in Vermont
Yeah.
couldn't be farther apart, right? I'm sitting here looking out these amazing glass windows and I'll see a moose on my lower yard, or I'll come up the road and a mother deer and her twins are galloping towards me, or I'm in the farm stand and a dragonfly is buzzing
Yes.
around really close and then lands on my leg. It's like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite nature connection moment?
As a kid, I loved going to the little creeks. Pennsylvania is innervated with creeks. We have just
Mm,
so many little tributaries and little springs randomly throughout the year. And my grandfather actually owned some really rugged, undevelopable land with a little cabin up in a county that's very rural. And so we
okay.
would go up there as kids and meet up with my aunts and uncles and cousins, and we would just be allowed to roam these woods. And there were
Mm.
hemlocks that were still healthy, and it was just a magical time. But we would go down this little scramble and play in the creek and turn rocks over, and we called it salamander hunting. We never killed them.
Oh,
Just it's a challenge to catch a little slippery salamander, and they're the
yes.
little creatures that come in all these glowing colors and spots and stripes. And it was just this magical time. And I just always remembered loving that activity, that time in nature with my family and those little creatures. So that's one of
Mm.
my, what we call in ecological and nature connection studies, a motivational species
Oh,
that
interesting.
you deeply connect with in a personal way, and it
Yeah.
motivates you to do something about the planet.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I could talk to you for hours,
Yeah.
but I realize that we do have to end this at some point. So I know you've got two different things that we wanted to share with
Yeah.
listeners. One of
Yeah.
them was this really cool 9 signs of eco awakening, which I can't wait to sign up for as soon as we get off. Can you tell
Awesome.
us about that?
Yeah, yeah. So over the last couple of years, I started that story I shared with you about my own ecological awakening. And then witnessing many others go through this turning point or this perspective shift. And I realized that there were lots of different signs of that happening. Some are emotional, some are time related, some are relational, and some are even physical body, like a heightened, like physical sensitivity to chemicals, toxins, things in the
Mm,
environment. Stuff that you are really, really good at helping people understand what's happening and why and how to get that
thank
out of
you.
their life. Yeah. But these different sensitivities or realizations or shifts in perspective, I found and there are probably more than this, but I found at least 9 that I could, write about and see happening in people's lives through my work and in my own life. And so I went and sort of organized them in a way that there's a little description about the sign so you can understand and see if it vibes with you, if you match with that sign. And then there's wisdom from inspired mostly indigenous authors about something
Nice.
related to that to reinforce that this is not just something you're making up or I made up, but there's
Right.
real deep connection to wisdom here from, people that are well respected. And then also there's some action points, something you can journal about or do in nature or an activity that can help you integrate that experience. So that's
Nice.
a
I love
PDF
that.
and it's colorful and beautiful.
Great. So I'll put the link below this in the show notes. And then you've got an Earth Care library.
Yeah, yeah. So over the years, especially working with clients in my local area, it would spread word of mouth that we were able to help people do things on their property. People would ask for things like a composting guide or a checklist for a seasonal cleanup or whatnot. And then people
Mm,
beyond our service range were reaching out to me for help as well. So I could do a Zoom consultation and try to talk them through like coaching, but I
yep.
realized I was just creating a lot of supportive materials, so I started compiling them and curating them into what became the Earth Care Library. So we've got
Nice.
how to seed a mini meadow in your backyard. We've got a checklist for building wildlife habitat. What are the things that you need to have, to make it really a habitat? Lots and lots of different things that are in all kinds of different formats, a video course on land walking. And we're adding to that every month with different piece of content that is inspired by the season or something that's happening in the world that's helpful and supportive. I think last month we published a poison ivy guide.
Ooh.
It's a native plant, but it's like really
Yeah.
harmful to your skin. So how do
Yeah.
you work around it and how do you dispose of it, et cetera. So just lots of the little practical things like that. And then we
Nice.
deliver a monthly zine that has poetry and art and photos from our members, just a little zine that shares, oh, here's a few things from the archive that might be relevant right now. Here's the new item and the upcoming item and, whatever other inspired
Oh,
artwork.
that sounds so lovely. Great. Well, I'm going to put the link for that also in the
Thank
show
you.
notes. And what is something that you would love to share that I haven't yet asked you?
Ooh, that's always a tough question. The wild card.
Right, exactly. So what is behind curtain number 3?
All right. I guess to leave listeners with the possibility and the hope that it's not, oh, yeah, I just got a little emotional, that it's not
Oh,
over yet. It's not too
yeah.
late, that we really can make a difference in our place. If all it takes is getting outside and connecting with nature, then you're making a difference for your own nervous system, your own body health, wellness, and that's going to slowly build. If you can take another step and take some action and do some kind of gardening for pollinators in a community garden or a neighbor's yard or a church that you have connection with, whatever it is, if you can do a small thing, it actually does make a really big difference to the small things that we
Yeah.
overlook. And that there's other steps. If you're not somebody that feels like you can, if you don't think you have a green thumb, which I think is not true of any human, we all have green thumbs. We just, some of them are hidden.
Right. Right.
You can advocate for the earth and you can show up at
Mhm.
your local government. And there's just so much that we're overlooking that we actually have a voice and we actually have power and we actually have the ability to make a difference in a small way, in a small place. It's
Yeah.
thinking of the global crisis, the poly crisis, the ecological collapse that is just way too
Yes.
big. You cannot
Absolutely.
actually tackle that problem. You can't end war. You can't stop fashion industry from polluting our oceans, but you can do something in your neighborhood. You can do something at your school board. You can do something for the people right around. And if we all had that perspective, I think a lot
Yeah.
more progress could be
Oh,
made.
I think that's perfect. And I will add the one thing that I've noticed over the years is that we have a lot more power than we think we
Yeah.
do. And one place to look for that is look what happens when we bond together in a boycott of something.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when enough people say, nope, we don't want that,
Yep.
it does make a difference.
Yeah, that's a huge action you can take, actually. It's a non-action, right? It's like,
Yes,
I refuse to use my money and my hard-earned labor to support this
exactly.
industry. Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
because what we buy is a vote that we want more of that.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. What a great conversation. I'm going to have you back another time.
Well, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure connecting with you, and I appreciate the work you do
Likewise.
so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Kendra. I appreciate your work. It's exactly what's needed. So
Thank
thank
you.
you. You've been listening to the Green Living Now podcast, where we detox, elevate, and thrive. If you loved this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss a moment. And join me at greenlivingnow.com for the Conscious Woman's Guide 5 Steps to a Toxic Free Home and Lifestyle. Because your healthiest home and diet is the foundation for your radiant life. See you next week.